Julia Gaspar-Bates. I am going to be moderating this, and I am currently the local group's director on the SIETAR USA Board of Directors. So again, thank you very much. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our three presenters today, Sue Shinomiya, Wayne Henry, and Yuko Deneuville. And thank you all very much for being here today.
Great, thank you. So I'll start. I'm Wayne, and I'm in the Florida group. I currently have my own business, businessupgraders.com, doing lots of intercultural training. I've been doing that for the last 2 years, and before that I was working in higher education here in Florida, and before that in England and Ireland, working at universities, and before that was lived 8 years in Japan. Mainly working with international students, but doing lots of cultural training throughout my career. So delighted to be with you today, and I hope some of our insights and experiences will be helpful for you, whatever your interest in Japan, whether you're going to the upcoming conference in Japan for SIETAR Japan, or if you're maybe planning to go to Japan in the near future, or just have some interest about this fascinating country and culture. We're very happy that you've joined us today. So I'll let Sue introduce herself.
Thank you. Good morning. Ohayou gozaimasu. And Wayne, would you be so kind as to put the slides up on the screen? I'm not sure I'm seeing those. If we can. Anyway, meanwhile, I will talk a little bit about myself as Julia, thankfully for inviting us here, and also to Holly for having us come on for this particular panel so that we can help people who are going to the International Congress in Tokyo next month might have a chance to prepare. And also those of you who are interested, and I am calling in from Portland, Oregon this morning, and I do have my own business, Global Business Passport, and I'm very interested in the US-Japan picture. I've been going between the two countries for about the last 3 decades, and I'm looking forward to going back again this time. And of course, have one foot in each culture all of the time because I am married to a Japanese national and have a kid who is going between 2 cultures all the time as well. So looking forward to this, and I'll turn it over to Yuko-san. Go ahead, Yuko.
ありがとうございます。Yes, my name is Yuko Deneuville, and I am also very happy to be here today. Thank you very much, Julia and Holly, for organizing everything, and I'm really happy to facilitate this webinar with Wayne and Sue. So I am calling from Melbourne, Florida, and I am currently the SIETAR Florida chair. So as you can hear my accent, my very strong accent. So I am half French and Japanese. I was born in France and lived in Japan, in Tokyo, during 9 years, from my 6 years old to 15, with my Japanese mom and French dad. And I was in Japan just last month to visit my relatives. So I try to go to Japan to visit my relatives often. And it was a great experience because I could introduce my 2 daughters to my Japanese family. You can see here the picture with my Japanese mom and my 2 daughters, who are also very multicultural because I'm married to a Vietnamese husband. And I am also an intercultural consultant and coach, and I have my business called yukodeneuville.com. That's all.
All right, let's have a quick,
great.
Wayne, let me do a quick sound check. Could you let us know, everyone on the webinar, if you see the slides? Just a quick chat message or a quick yes, no would be great. Are you able to see the slides?
Unfortunately, Sue does not see the slides, so I'm trying to figure this one out.
Well, I'm receiving several yeses. So for the webinar, it's working great. Thank you, everyone.
I'm having trouble progressing them though, Holly. There's a bad delay.
If you would like me to progress them, just say next slide. I can do that for you.
Yeah, let's do that because it's not working for me.
All right, give me 1 second, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Give me just a moment. All right, so next slide. There you go.
Right, so this is Wayne again, and this is roughly what we have planned to cover today. I'm going to talk a bit about the culture map, so look at key differences between the two cultures that are quite interesting and important to consider initially. And then Sue's going to talk about some advanced concepts about the Japanese culture and continue on leading about talking about the Japanese language, covering some basics that everyone should know that's going to Japan and giving you just a little bit heads up there. And Yuko's going to take over leading with Japanese etiquette, and then a few logistics, tops, tips, and resources. And then we'll end with any questions you have. So as we go along, if you have a question or a comment or something, please jot that down, and then at the end we can answer those for you. Okay, Holly, next slide. Right, so I'm going to talk about the culture map. One of the tools I often use is the culture map by Erin Meyer. There are lots of similar tools, but I find it's really helpful to have a starting point. She identifies 8 different scales that she uses to look initially, and it's a great guide. So those start with communicating scale, looking at low context to high context. Evaluating scale, looking at how people receive feedback, especially negative feedback. The leading scale, so how is the leadership organized? Is it hierarchical or egalitarian? Again, on a scale. How are decisions made? Is it top-down or consensual? Next. And then trusting, is it relationship-based culture, or can you get right down and get right down to task and do business quickly? How does the culture disagreeing scale? How does the culture relate to confrontation, or is that do people avoid it, or is that healthy? Is there open discussion about that? Is it kind of accepted or not? Scheduling, how they relate to time? Are they really punctual, linear time, or are they very flexible around appointments and other things around time? And the last one, which is not applicable to all, persuading, how are people persuaded? So we can go into the example of Japan, the next one, and we actually show the culture map of East Asia. So I find this is helpful. Glaringly huge gap there is the top scale, communicating scale. And Erin's data shows that America in the orange, the US, and Japan, the red, the far right, they're actually the furthest apart of any two countries on the scale. So that's one of the key areas for any American going to Japan that I try to really stress, that the communication style is extremely different, and that's going to be typically going to be the biggest challenge. Evaluating scale, very indirect negative feedback. Japan on the far right, America's more in the middle. The leading scale, America's far left on the egalitarian side, compared to Japan in the middle. It's very hierarchical. And that's interesting in the deciding scale. If you look at usually a hierarchical society, the decision making is top down on the far right, but Japan is far left. Even though they're very hierarchical in their structure, decisions are often made very on a consensual basis. So very group oriented there. So that's quite unique and something to be aware of. On the next scale, trusting, Japan's far right, not as far as Korea and China, interestingly enough, but building relationships is really important, as is many cultures. And America is perhaps unique in that it's very far left. So this is a huge challenge for especially American businessmen going to Japan and other relationship-based countries where they want to go in and do quick sale, to someone they don't know. So that's where they typically fall down, and there has to be a lot of time spent in building up relationships, building trust, and getting introductions. Those things is pretty vital. So that's another thing that's really important to keep in mind. Disagreeing scale. Japanese are far right there. They avoid confrontation at all costs, really. So keep that in mind. You'll rarely see someone losing their temper in public. It's just not done. And the concept of losing face is really strong as well. So to openly embarrass someone or humiliate them is really frowned upon, and you won't see a lot of emotion when they're speaking and interactions there. So that's something to keep in mind. And then on the scheduling line, Japanese are very punctual. Don't be late for a business meeting, that's for sure. It's very rude to keep people waiting, and even things down to the trains are by the second. And if there's a minute late, people start to panic. So keep to time. Things start punctually, and they're definitely not flexible in their time. So that's very quick. Today, I wanted to highlight that to you. And again, there's lots of points around a culture when you're comparing. This is a great starting point to start that conversation. Often use this tool. Like I said, there are lots of others as well. And for America and Japan, I really want to stress to you today, the communicating scale is really vital, and just the way you communicate is going to be your biggest challenge. So go into a bit more detail next. And just want to mention, when we're looking at any sort of data on a grid or scale, it's obviously, that point is decided by the majority. You're likely to interact with people that are outliers, that don't fit the majority, especially if you're interacting with people that are in the intercultural field, things like that. So, don't try to enforce stereotypes there. There will be exceptions, keep them up in mind. And Japanese people who have traveled or interacted with people from other countries are going to be knowledgeable about other ways of doing things, and they will likely make accommodations and adjust their communication style with you. All right, so move on to the next one. And also, it's helpful. Erin allows you to do a self-assessment. So if your communication style or your personal score is likely to be very difficult than the norm for your country as well. Certainly as for me is on the American scale. So if you're interested in that, you can do this for free. Go onto Erin's website and do a self-assessment, and you can be more specific with your comparisons with the norms in Japan. So I find that helpful. I often use this, and IDI I often use it as another tool to be a base for people to adjust to a new culture. So that's something you might consider. Next. Right, so let's go back. Just remind ourselves, communicating scale is what we want to stress today. That's the biggest gap there. I tried to highlight a few others that are important for Japan as well, but communication is key. In my background, I first went to Japan when I was 19 as a study abroad student, and my university prepared me very badly for that experience. I grew up in rural Oregon. My first airplane ride ever was going to Tokyo, and I was dropped in the center of Tokyo with no preparation really. So culture shock was just huge, and I really had no idea what was going on. So I just wanted to share a bit of insight there and a few tips. So if we can move on to the next slide. Hopefully you're familiar with the low context, high context culture. So a low context culture, which America, again, is the furthest left of any country on Erin's scale. Good communication is precise, simple, and clear. Messages are expressed and understood at face value. Repetition is appreciated if it helps clarify the communication. So you have an agenda, you reiterate the points, you say, I'm going to talk about this, this is what I'm talking about, and then this is what I talked about. Typically would be in a presentation, reiterate, you make things clear again and again and again. That's considered good communication in a low context culture. High context culture, on the other hand, good communication is sophisticated, nuanced, and layered. Messages are both spoken and read between the lines. Messages are often implied, but not plainly expressed. So this is huge in Japan. There's a lot of nonverbal communication. Certainly what is said, there's so much more going on. And often even in Japan, they'll say the opposite of what they actually mean. So it certainly, threw me when I first went to Japan. I remember my early days teaching in the school system. One of the teachers invited me over to his home for dinner, so I was quite honored. And he said, welcome to my home. I'm sorry, it's so messy. This is my ugly wife who's a horrible cook, and these are my stupid kids. And I was really shocked by that. And knowing later in Japan, they often say the opposite of what they mean, and maybe in Japanese it wouldn't sound so strange, but that really took me off guard, and it's kind of a good example. And there's even a saying when someone gives you a gift, "Maranai mono desu ka?" It means literally, excuse me, I'm sorry for the boring gift. Typically they only say that if it was a really nice gift. So not only is there a lot of non-verbal communication, but often what is said has the opposite meaning of what they actually mean. So just be aware of that. And there's a high context culture. You've really got to increase your visual cues, look at increase your non-verbal communication style, be very observant, and really work hard to read between the lines. Let's move on to the next slide. So I like this visual. I found this a few years ago. Low context, again, on the left. So really our view is very narrow. What we can see is what we pay attention to is mainly the words, maybe a few gestures and tone. But all the other stuff that's going around really is invisible to us, or really not understood. Where on the right-hand side, the high context cultures, their view is much wider. So what's actually said is a small part of everything that they're looking at. They want to know your background, your history. Who do you know? Look at your what you're wearing, your posture. They'll read between the lines and maybe take it too far, putting meaning to things that there isn't. You didn't mean it to put any meaning there, but that's really the key. And Yuko and Sue, I don't know if you have any examples that you might want to share related to high context, low context culture that you want to stress, or some examples.
Yes, it's Yuko speaking. So just one example I have is that each time I go to Japan or from France or from United States where I live, I have to adjust that to the Japanese way of communicating. So to avoid using too much facial expression when disagreement, especially because in France we show freely our disagreement on our face. So I have to avoid doing that, for example, in Japan. And also compared to the United States, where vocal variety is very important, when I go to Japan, I have to adjust myself and avoid using vocal variety. And Japanese language is pretty flat too. So this is just a few examples. And also no body language, avoid doing too much gesture in Japan. Yeah.
Yes, this is Sue, and that's a really interesting point that Yuko just made about avoiding too much body language, because you think about this as the radar, and the high context radar of Japan is really quite open and paying attention to a lot of these other signals that in the US, for example, we don't even think about the gestures. It's kind of an accent on what we're saying. And I have often been misinterpreted in Japan as being very angry or being very passionate, when I was just shrugging my shoulders, for example, or rolling my eyes, they might be interpreted, kind of accelerated or amplified in a way that you did not intend. And I think the other one that's really, Wayne said a really good point about people kind of saying the opposite of what they mean. Just to put that in a little more context, the typical example is when you are in a meeting and people are saying, listening to you speak, and they're nodding their head and saying, yes, yes, yes. Your Japanese counterparts might be saying that. From their point of view, that might just be polite listening. And it's not to be confused with people lying that they understand you and they agree with you 100%. That's not what it is. It's the acceptable and kind of common sense standard norm of showing polite listening behaviors, which is often confused with agreement or absolute understanding. So just a point on that. Thank you.
Great, thanks. All right, so if we move to the next slide, and I think this section's done. Right, so my top tips for Americans or low context cultures going to Japan in a high context culture. Socrates says it best, says nature has given you 2 ears, 2 eyes, but 1 tongue. To that end, we should hear and see more than we speak. And certainly when I was helping study abroad students adjust to Japan, I always told them, really observe, stop talking loudly on the train, maybe look around, look at people's body language, really try to, be more observant, and, listen and speak less. So that's my top tip to help you adjust to a high context culture. It's quite fun, but challenging. All right, so we're going to move on to the next section. So Sue's going to lead on this, talking about some advanced concepts.
Okay, and thank you very much, Wayne, for your wonderful introduction and overview to various concepts and various ideas that are related to Japan. What I'm going to try to do is take this group of wonderful interculturalists who are on the line a little bit under the surface of the iceberg, the cultural iceberg of Japan. And I also, when I was introducing myself, I should give you a little more context of my Japan picture. I've been going back and forth between the 2 countries of US and Japan, for the last 4 decades, oh boy, and have recently been there, was there in this last March. And I'm always interested in bringing that culture a little bit more to the surface, making it a bit more accessible. And at the end, I'll tell you more about my book and some resources that we will have tried to make available to you. Some of you are asking about whether we will be sharing the slides. We'll have an abbreviated version of them available as a PDF afterwards. So let's get started. Now, there are some advanced concepts that you see in front of you here, and some of you might be familiar with some of these. We had to choose from among our multiple thousands of concepts that are very important to understanding Japanese culture. As Wayne had mentioned, there's a complexity to it and a lot of context that's important. But if we had to pick just a few that would be helpful to a visitor in Japan, and particularly to people who might be going to a congress there, as a competent interculturalist, we want to show up and be our best selves, but also find a way to connect with the culture and be polite within the context of that culture. So these were the several that we picked, and certainly wa, which is harmony or appearance of harmony, would be one. Kata, which is form, or the idea of trying to do the right thing. Omotenashi, I'm going to explain that when I get to that slide. Awaseru, which is adjusting and fitting in, or I like to use the word standing in as opposed to standing out. And then kokujin or gaijin, which is the word for outside countries person or foreigner, which I think is an important concept to understand about what's inside the culture, what's outside the culture, how that is perceived. And note that we didn't include some of the ones you usually hear about, such as hierarchy or concept of face. I mean, there's so many. And I will try to bring those in as they are relevant. So let's go to the first one, the first concept, which is wa. If you could turn to that slide, thank you. So wa, harmony, and you may have heard something about this. And it seems like, here are these people who are looking at the rock garden and they seem so peaceful and, kind of Zen-like presence. Let's not confuse wa with Zen, because wa also can mean appearance of harmony. And under the surface, there can be a lot that's going on. There's an expression you may have heard in Japan that the nail that sticks up gets hammered down, deru kugi o utareru, which means that you don't want to be the one that's the odd person out, the one who is, standing up in conflict or has the contradictory argument or does the thing that's different from everybody else. And it's not because there's no desire to live your dreams, etc. It's just that it's not a comfortable thing to be the standout in a culture that has a lot of value put around fitting in. If you think of that small island nation and people are crowded together and there are not many resources on that island and there are kind of a history of natural disasters, etc., the idea that we should cooperate and get along in a crowded space, it's pretty natural if you think about the kind of geological and historical imperative that's gone on in Japan. I won't get into the history of it today. That would be a much longer webinar, but there's a lot of kind of the background on what has led up to the idea that people would cooperate. There's a video that's out there on YouTube called Japanese Mindfulness of Others, which I think is quite wonderful and adorable. It sort of looks at this idea of people trying to harmonize with each other. Below the surface is this desire to be comfortable because we are in a crowded space. We don't have a lot of resources. We have to kind of use our own means to get along. So examples of this in the workplace might be you don't want to say the opposite opinion or contradict your boss in front of everybody else. You might find another place to do that, but not in front of everybody else. That's just one small example. Okay, let's go to the next slide, which is kata. And if any of you who might remember that old movie, the Karate Kid, now notice the way I say it. Karate is how they would say it in Japanese. Karate is how we say it in the US. We're going to get to pronunciation in a moment, but just kind of putting that out there. But at the beginning of the karate exercise, they would have something called the form or the kata. So kata is the kind of advanced thing that you do before you do the actual bout. And in the kind of workaday world and in the general population, it's all of the things you do to make sure the thing has the right form or format. Notice the picture on the left here of my breakfast at Haneda Airport's cafe and the picture of the breakfast. And they look almost exactly identical. They fit exactly, although people noticed that the sausage just turned the wrong way. So maybe that's a tiny bit out of the kata, but just that's one example of how things fitting the picture, things fitting your microchip needs to fit the specs, things need to fit the expectation that's kind of laid out in advance. And the tea ceremony picture at the top of the page is kind of the highest example of kata, that model, that the appearance and having things go in a certain format. And then the people that are the young people, the new hires in the picture on the bottom there, they're learning how to bow in a proper way, to represent their company, and to greet people who are visitors who might be coming, guests who might be coming. So again, getting at the right way of doing things. So there are several examples on the bottom right here. A tea ceremony was one of them. Wearing white gloves for taxi drivers or for the fellows and women sometimes now who will push you to get onto the train. Gift giving and the proper way of gift giving, as Wayne had pointed out earlier, you give it humbly, but you give it with both hands and it's wrapped beautifully, and probably the gift might be an expensive and wonderful thing. So business card exchange would be another one. If we were all here in person, I would have everybody stand up now and do a business card exchange. Just the thing to remember with the business card, if you don't remember anything else, is handle it like you're giving a gift to somebody with both hands, and receive their card like you're receiving a precious gift. Don't put it in your back pocket, don't write on it, etc. All right, let's move on to one more example with kata. So this was just something that I found on the internet that kind of, to me, demonstrated something about how normal it is for Japanese to want to put things in the proper place. They say katazuke, which is getting things in the right place. And you see on this slide over here on this picture, these are students, I believe, who, they're asking them where they're from, help us do our survey. And you'll notice that we've got, France, USA, Korea, but the one for Japan, they made an attempt to get everything all lined up in a certain way. And I thought this was brilliant. It's like just such a natural thing to want things to be properly in their place. If in a business world, a business context, for example, if you're having a meeting in a room and you leave the meeting room, put the chairs away, erase the whiteboard, get the trash off the table, because that will give a much better impression to the next people who come into your room. It's kind of one of those little pet peeves that my Japanese clients have said about working with people from other countries. They don't understand how to put things away properly. Okay, very good. Let's move on to the next concept, which has a relationship to the other two. Omotenashi. And this is definitely a concept. Omotenashi means hospitality. In a sense, it's even beyond that, though. I think of it as being leaving the customer or leaving the person who you are hosting as wanting nothing. And there's a part of the kata that goes with it, and ningen kankei, which is human-to-human relationships, and customer service is all wrapped up in this. Omotenashi is a sense of taking care of people in a way that they don't have to ask for anything more. And it is a concept that Japan used when they were lobbying to get the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, the Summer Olympics, which are coming there, that we have the best kind of way of hosting and the best sense of customer service through omotenashi. And they were successful. So you'll see the people bowing and bowing to the customer here, and it says, Okyakusama wa kami-sama, the customer is like a god. Now let's be clear that this is talking about Japanese in the religion in the Shinto sense. In Shintoism, there are 8 million gods. The gods are kind of in everything. So there's not the one god, but the idea that they elevate the customer and that the customer's requests and desires and any kind of request for features, for example, should be met if possible. And that it should be standard. The customer service across Japan is pretty standard. There might be set phrases that they say as you're checking out at the store, et cetera, It's not personalized like it might be in the US. You won't get to know their name. You won't get to know their personal favorites, but you will have a high standard of customer service in general. And this picture at the bottom right is just showing the guy who is trying to get his ticket on the train, and you see the other guy's head is popping out, because there's also a sense that this omotenashi should include a human touch. So even if they have a robot who is serving you, I went to a robot cafe last time in Japan, and the robot had a little face on it that would smile or kind of look one way or look the other way. So it gave you a sense of human touch in addition to giving you the good customer service. So that's kind of all wrapped up in this omotenashi concept. So let's move that on to the next one. Can you slide to the next slide? There we go, thank you. And this is the concept of awaseru. And awaseru means adjusting to fit in, or I mentioned earlier the idea of standing in versus standing out. And I have three images here, which I'll try to explain in connecting to this concept, and also connecting to some of the concepts that Wayne had brought up with the culture map. But that's my picture, my family portrait on the left. That's me and my husband and my kid, and we're at the Grand Canyon. We look very casual and, just sort of this selfie type of picture. This is what we use for our family portraits for Christmas or whatever that year. The picture in the middle is one of my colleagues from graduate school, went to graduate school in the US, along with everybody else, but his family portrait for the summer looked a lot more like this. There's that formality, there's, everybody fits into the family, they all look like they are intentionally doing this portrait, and it's very, very common and typical, and it's quite a comfortable thing to fit in and adjust. So I like this kind of contrast, not good, not bad, but just a different way of showing something about yourself and your culture. Going over to the picture on the right side, this is a very common train photo. I was there in March, and March happens to be the season of kafunsho, which is the allergy season for the cedar pollen. And notice that everybody who on the train, they kind of look lined up, they almost have a common color theme, and everybody is wearing a mask. And the mask is, again, to protect people from all that pollen. But it's kind of this uniformity. Everybody's doing it, so perhaps I should join in and do that. It's easy, it's comfortable. It's not to say that there aren't individuals and a ton of creativity going on in Japan, but kind of on a surface level, adjusting and fitting in is just a way to go that you're not swimming upstream all the time. You're trying to kind of be part of the society and be a good member of society. And this brings us to the next concept, which is relevant to us going to Japan. Gaikokujin or gaijin, the concept of, you see the kanji there, the characters mean literally outside and then country, and then person. Outside country, person. I have that here. Outside country and person. And inside to outside is really especially demarked in Japanese culture. If you think of going into a Japanese home, for example, there's the outside world, and there's a kind of entryway and a genkan transition place where you take off your shoes and you step up into the genkan, into the house, which is the inside of the house, and you take off your shoes, you maybe wear slippers. There's this delineation of inside to outside that is prevalent in a lot of different ways in Japan, and also when it comes to people. And the stereotypical looking guy here with the blonde hair, and he's having trouble using the chopsticks, etc., that might be, again, kind of the myth, or what, a Japanese person, when they think gaijin, they might be thinking of something like that. But the truth of the matter is that most foreigners in Japan now are from other Asian countries. There's been a great influx of particularly Chinese tourists, and let's see, Malaysian, Indonesian, Southeast Asian, and I think that this couple here that's shown on the left, they are from the Philippines, and they're so excited because they could go into this tourist office and dress up in a kimono and yukata and hakama and have a picture taken, etc. They're very excited to be in Japan, and I think that's more of the truth of the matter, is that people who are in Japan coming from other countries are generally quite happy to be there and trying their best to learn the culture and fit in, etc. But there is a sense of insider and outsider. If I go to Japan, even though I'm married to a Japanese and I have a Japanese name and I speak the language and I kind of follow along with the behaviors, it's not usual for people to automatically look at me and assume that I would be a Japanese person. They would assume that I'm an outside country person and treat me a little bit differently. And I might be treated a little bit differently if I have, lighter skin versus darker skin, or if I look more European rather than looking Asian. And I just always try to go in and assume the best and assume that people want to treat me as a guest in their home, which would be Japan. And so if I want to be a good guest in Japan, I try to find some ways that I can adjust and fit in by speaking the language, by not being kind of obviously loud or being, as Yuko had pointed out, using too many gestures when I'm talking that would be distracting to my Japanese colleagues. But at the same time, I'm fortunate because as a person coming from the U.S., I don't have the expectation that I should be exactly like a Japanese person. So if I am like a Japanese person, or if I behave a little bit more in a way that lines up with Japanese culture, it's usually a welcome thing. And if I speak Japanese, it's usually a very welcome thing. So just be aware of that you may want to adjust this to fit in a little bit and watch what other people are doing and ask people. And if I'm stuck, or if I think I've made a mistake, I always just apologize and say, I'm trying to learn your culture. Please help me, teach me. And for the most part, Japanese are quite happy to teach you about their culture. Okay, let's move on to the next part. This is kind of a good segue to looking at Japanese language, because as we all know as interculturalists, beneath the surface of any cultural iceberg, there's that language that has been formed over thousands and thousands of years in the case of Japan that really does match up with a culture. The first thing I want to do, though, is kind of at the surface of the iceberg, is give you this pronunciation guide. In Japanese, the lucky thing is that you have every syllable is or every word is basically a consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, and the vowels never change their pronunciation no matter what you are putting them with, except sometimes they get dropped. So if you can remember that if you see an A, it's going to sound like ah, and you see an I, it's going to sound like E, and the U, a U is a U, and an E is eh, and O is O. So we soon get old is kind of a good mechanism to remember that. So let's use the first word that's up here, which is the word for good morning. And I can't hear all of you, but give it a try wherever you're at. Ohio sounds like the state of Ohio. Don't confuse it with any other state, but Ohio, and then the word gozaimasu, which is a polite way to say kind of a state of being or a be verb. So Ohayo gozaimasu, you can try that on your own, Ohayo gozaimasu. And I learned Ohio as my first Japanese word ever, and I thought, oh, Ohio, that's such an easy word to pronounce. I'm going to be great at Japanese, and of course that was only the beginning. It's a very complex language, but at least the pronunciation is consistent. The next word is a very handy one, sumimasen. Everybody try that, sumimasen. which means excuse me. It can mean I'm sorry. It can mean thank you. It has a lot of purposes in life. The literal translation is it's not finished yet. So it's kind of a nice way to approach that. So sumimasen. And then, of course, if you're going to Japan, then you're going to be meeting people and greeting people. So this is a very handy word, hajimemashite, which literally means on our first time. So it's a way to introduce yourself. It's kind of like how do you do or nice to meet you, but hajimemashite, everybody try that, hajimemashite. So these are some simple expressions for you. Ohayo gozaimasu, sumimasen, and hajimemashite. And I want you to, there's one word that I definitely want to get out here because it's our title of our talk today. We'll be learning a few more Japanese words in a moment, but we had konnichiwa, from konnichiwa to karaoke. And now when we say in the US karaoke, which is become common lexicon, but in Japan it's always karaoke. You can see that, karaoke. So karaoke, and what we meant by that is by using language, by understanding the concepts, by understanding the gaps or the differences in the styles and the cultures, you can get from saying hello, konnichiwa, to going out with people and doing karaoke and actually building a relationship. So that's a kind of important segue that you can use. All right, let's get to the next part of the slide. I think there's an annotation there. Yes. So note that there are 3 different writing systems in Japan. Kanji is, of course, the characters that they borrowed from Chinese at a certain point in their history in order to have a writing system, but it didn't match the actual language, so they had to add the second alphabet system of hiragana. And so you see kanji, the word kanji, it is kanji, and then hiragana, a, I, U, E, O is right here. And then they had to build a third alphabet system in because they needed something to accommodate foreign words. So they came up with this idea of katakana, and that also says a, I, U, E, O right there. So note that, yes, Japanese writing system, it's complicated, but if you can learn at least one of these alphabet systems, you're partway there, and learn 2 of them, you can read a lot pretty well, but you really do need those kanji, and you have to learn something like, I don't know, 2,000 kanji in order to read a newspaper. So that's a sophisticated language when it comes to writing, but it's also very beautiful, as you can see, and I'd say it's worth the trouble. So let's go to the next slide, which I have a little bit of grammar and explanation here, how it works in a sentence. So to say, I like coffee in English, what's interesting about this is the Japanese one is kohi is the first word, ga, which is the particle, ski, which is like, and there's, you see the kanji that's in there. And then des is the state of being verb. And note that the verb is at the end of the sentence. This is important because if you interrupt a Japanese person in the middle of their sentence, you've missed the most important part of their sentence, which is the verb. So it's very hard to rewire for that. So try very hard not to interrupt or overlap with other people and wait until somebody is actually finished speaking. But kohi, notice that there's a borrowed word there. That's the katakana. Ga, and that's a particle, suki des. So if you can repeat that, kohi ga suki des, then you can let everybody know that your preference is coffee. So just as a nice one sentence. Maybe you can change that to biru. Biru ga suki desu, beer. But let's look at the next page, because speaking of katakana, which is the borrowed words, just at the next slide, I have a few of these. And I'm going to go through this quickly because I think these are all have annotations, but if you can go to the next one. Okay, so, all right, so I'm just going to give you one word here, hamburger. Can you guess what that means in English? Hamburger. I hope you can hear it. It's hamburger. But in Japanese, it's katakana. English, this is the phonetic for it. And here's the next one, sandwichi. Can you hear that? Sandwichi. Sandwich. Okay, next one. Toire. This is a little more complex. Toire. This is the word that Japanese might use for toilet. It's a little bit direct, but that's actually what they might say. Toire wa doko desu ka? Where is the toilet? And here's another one that's pretty common. Hoteru, hotel. Okay, next one. Elevator. Elevator. I think it was Wayne, you were saying that your mother thought she knew Japanese because she could say the word for elevator in Japanese. Elevator. Okay, and then the next one. This is a little bit more interesting or distorted. SIETAR. SIETAR. Anybody want to guess? This is the word for Twitter. Twitter. SIETAR. That's what you might use on your phone. No, this is the word meron for the thing you eat, meron. Not to be confused with the next one, which is maron. And maron is a kind of Japanese sweeter, and that you something that you put in a sweet. So it's a little bit different from the meron and maron. So some similar sounding words, and Japanese sometimes think that these might be English words that they're using for their katakana English, but sometimes it turns out to be from some other country entirely. The word arubaito.
Maron is French. Maron is French.
You know, I didn't know that. Okay, so maron is French, and then also, let's see, what are some other words? Like pan, the word pan for bread is Portuguese, and arubaito. It's French too, right? And then arubaito, which is for arbeit, which is the word for part-time job, which comes from German.
Yeah. So katakana is handy. I mean, it's for all foreign words. So Japanese often assume they're English. You know, maron threw me off. I thought they were. Someone asked me, "Do you like maron?" I was like, "You mean melon?" No, maron. I was like, "That looks like a chestnut to me." I don't know. You know, what are you talking about? And then later I realized it's French. So, but like for a menu, you know, you'll see a lot of food is going to be in katakana. So my tip for you is there's lots of English disguised in Japanese. If you can kind of tackle katakana before you go, it can help you a lot. A lot of instances, you know, knowing where the toilet is, sign for hotel, food in a menu. So it's English in disguise, and also gives you practice of hearing the katakana pronunciation of English. So in the school system, you know, they learn a lot of vocabulary and grammar, but the pronunciation they teach is often katakana English. So I am going to the store. So if you can kind of understand, you know, how the katakana pronunciation, that can help you with your communication often.
Yes, very important point. So we're not going to go into all of this, but if you go to the next slide, this is a little bit about some phrases that might be helpful, but I think there are two things. What Wayne and Yuko have just said about the katakana English helping you to understand their English as well as them understanding your English. But the thing that I think, and Yuko, I believe you would agree, is the most important thing is to slow down. And you'll be talking about that at the end of this, right, Yuko?
Oh, yes, I will. But I agree
okay, very good. Yes. Yeah, you have to really slow down because people have studied English for at least 6 years of their high school and junior high and often well into elementary school, but they might not be able to hear it at a native speaker pace. I'd be speaking much like half of my speed or a third of my speed. And often people can understand if all I have to do is slow down. I don't have to learn all of Japanese and be fluent. But in case you want to know a few words in Japanese, here's some of them that are useful. We already mentioned, if you can click to the next one, sumimasen, which is excuse me, to get the waiter to order in a restaurant, or sumimasen when you're trying to move through a crowd, or sumimasen can mean say that again, etc. Gomennasai, useful if you want to apologize for some faux pas you have made as a non-Japanese. Gomennasai. Hajimemashite, we mentioned about. Did somebody want to say something? Is that you, Yuko?
No, it's not me.
Okay, next one. This one is also kind of fun and handy. Itadakimasu, which itadakimasu is like bon appetit, or for that which I am receiving before you start eating. And I was working with a Disney program, and I said, here's a good way to remember it. Eat a duck and mouse. And of course, the person working for Disney, ducks, mouse, didn't think that was a good way to remember it. So you'll have to think of something else if you work for Disney. But itadakimasu, gochisousama deshita, at the end of the meal when you're giving someone thanks. And if somebody has treated you to a meal, you might say gochisousama deshita. Okay, let's go run through this. Here's a good one. Kanpai, when you want to give a toast. Everybody try that. Kanpai. Okay, so next one. Keep going. Kudasai, something, kudasai. Kudasai is please, and that's a nice way to ask for something, to make a request. Ohayo gozaimasu, we already talked about. Let's go to the next one. Konnichi, which was the title of our program, which you say usually in the earlier part of the day. And some konbanwa is good evening or in the evening. Oishii, this tastes really good when you show appreciation for food. Sugoi, wow, that's great. Impressive. And of course, if you're going to Japan next month, you are going to hear this a lot. Atsui, or even the next one, I think is mushi atsui. Mushi is that hot and humid weather. Mushi atsui, you'll hear that a lot. Okay, so those are some words. And again, we'll be sending around a kind of abbreviated version of our slides later on, so you can try to memorize a few of those and feel free to ask us questions. Now I'm going to turn this over to Yuko, who is going to give you some very competent ideas about how to look good in Japan by understanding Japanese etiquette. Dozo.
Hi, domo. Thank you very much, Sue, for your very interesting presentation and very funny pictures, too. I really like the one with the family picture, your family picture and the other Japanese family pictures. So let's move on to the Japanese etiquette. So the text is a bit hidden here, but that's okay. So what I wanted to share is that, as we just mentioned earlier, when you say hello to a Japanese person, it's really important to bow to each other, and there are several different levels of bowing. So the more you respect the person in front of you, the more you need to bow strongly. So there are different degrees of bowing. So, but just to make it simple, if you're in front of somebody, you say hi, just bow a little bit more than the other person, so you show respect to the other person. What is also important is the use of keigo, so just to show respect to the other person. But just an easy way to do it is just to add san. So let's say you exchange a business card and you see the name of the person on the card. It says Hiroshi and the family name, the myoji. Then you can call the person by the myoji, the last name. Say, let's say it's Hiroshi Tsuji, you say, hello, Tsuji-san. Oh yes, you can show the different text. Thank you, Wayne, for doing that. It helps. And so you can just add the san and with the last name. And if the person says to you, oh, you can call me with my first name, then you can say Hiroshi-san. But the first time you meet somebody, you will say san after the last name. Also, as you already mentioned, there are some codes, some rules with the business card exchange. So just remember, you hand your business card with two hands, you receive with two hands. Same thing for the gift, which is called omiyage. I really highly recommend you to bring some omiyage. Just a small gift is fine, just small gift from your city or from United States, something very touristic, it's fine. But just a small gift that you can give to the people you're gonna meet. Let's say you know some people from SIETAR Japan. It's really welcome to prepare some gifts and beautifully wrapped. As Sue mentioned, it's important to wrap it beautifully, even if it's a small gift. It also, and here the three pictures show that the first picture, you see that the American and the Japanese bow to each other. So here the American made an effort. He's bowing, but just the small mistakes I can say he's doing is that he's looking into the eyes of the Japanese person. So usually when you bow to somebody, you will look, you don't look into the eyes, but you can look down just to show more respect. Here you can see that the Japanese isn't looking into the eyes of the American person. Just a small tip. Also, another information about the shoes into the house. So it's forbidden, as you said. There is a genkan area where you leave your shoes and then you can wear slipper. So you wear slipper, which is slippers. It's another katakana. Slipper, just there are specific slippers to walk into the house. The same thing when you enter into the restroom, for example. In some restrooms, there are also some specific slippers. So the keigo, I also already talked about it. And the last picture is a purikura. So as you probably know, Japanese really like the kawaii things. Kawaii means cute. And so purikura is one of these examples. So here is the purikura I took last month with my sister and my two daughters. And as you can see, what is interesting to see here is that the picture automatically widen our eyes. And also we have a white skin on the picture, which is not our real color. I'm a bit more color, but because Japanese really like the kawaii and they admire the Western style, big eyes, white skin, they automatically change the face on the película. Okay, so I think you can move on. Yes. Yes.
Yes, I was going to ask everyone to please mute their audio so that we don't have the background noise. And Yuko, we also have a question about the slippers about hotels and apartments. You also do the same thing with shoes and slippers.
Oh, yes, exactly. Thank you for the question, George, I can see. So yes, in the hotels too, when you enter into your room, there will be also slippers. So it's important to take off your shoes at the genkan, at the entrance of the room. And in the apartment, the same thing. So you always leave your shoes at the entrance. There is a specific area for this, the genkan.
Yuko, can I also add, also it's important, like in the genkan area, when you're taking your shoes off, try not to take your shoes off and then step on the floor in the genkan with your socks. That's kind of, that's seen as that area is a little bit dirty because that's where the shoes are. So try to step from your shoe up the step without stepping down on the tile floor. And also reversely, when you're leaving, oftentimes if you're seen as a good guest, see how the slippers are facing inwards. When you leave, the host might turn your shoes around as well. But try to step from the step step out of your slippers and down into your shoes. Don't step on the floor. It's really important.
Yeah, this is Sue here, and getting kind of specific too. If you go to a temple or a shrine and you have your sandals, etc., there may be places where it's more polite or respectful to actually have socks or stockings on. So I always carry just a little pair of thin socks or something, just in case I am in some situation that I didn't expect to be, where barefoot is not really the thing. So, these are some specifics, and it can be case by case. In some places, they provide you with things. One time I had to do some training in Japan, and I didn't feel comfortable as a professional wearing what to me feel like bedroom slippers. So they said it would be okay to bring shoes that have never touched the ground, meaning brand new shoes, and you can wear them in this training facility as long as they are completely clean. So once in a while, you can get away with that, but do make sure that you do, prepare that in advance.
And it might be helpful, to think about slip-on shoes, things that don't have a lot of laces, because if you do have to take your shoes on and off several times, you'll soon get sick of having to untie and tie your shoes.
Yes. Zip-up boots also a problem.
And be careful with the holes on your socks too. It can happen. So yes, so thank you. So that's I think that's all for this slide, I guess, Japanese etiquette. Let's move on to the next one, because for the time's sake. Yes, Japanese etiquette. So another information about that is the social events. Oh, sorry. Can you go back? I forgot there was another slide. So yes, thank you, Rain. Social events. So there are some rules too when you go out and for a toast or drink with your coworkers, or let's say with your friends from SIETAR Japan. The host will always fill your glass and make sure that you're drinking. So if your glass goes empty, he will continue filling your glass. And also there are some rules about sitting. So it comes from the history, from the samurai period. But because during the samurai period, so when there were wars, it was always safer to be seated far from the door. So if you're a guest, Japanese will make sure you're sitting far from the door, and it's still the case. Also regarding paying the bill, the host will also always want to pay the bill for you. And something it's very popular in Japan, as Sue said, is to go out for a karaoke. karaoke, not karaoke. So with friends, coworkers, even when you do a play date with moms and kids. Last month I went to a karaoke play date with other moms and their kids. So it's part of the culture, and you can find American songs also, not only Japanese songs, but there are plenty of American songs. And you will also notice that everything is very small in Japan. So compared to the American space, obviously. So the kitchen, as you can see on the picture, is very small, and also the restroom. There are some Japanese, still some Japanese toilets, Japanese restroom when you go on a public restroom. So they are both yoshiki and washiki, so Japanese style and Western style restroom. So don't worry about that. You will find Western style restroom too. And when you visit somebody's home, please make sure you take off your shoes, as we said, because there are also sometimes tatami, like the picture on the right. You can see I'm sitting on my knees, Japanese style. So it can hurt when you sit like this for a few minutes, but don't worry, Japanese will understand that you're not used to that, and you can just extend your legs a little bit. That's fine. So
also,
next
it might be worth mentioning.
Yes.
When you enter someone's home, if they have a tatami room, a room with tatami mats, even the indoor slippers, you wouldn't wear them on those mats. So you would take your indoor slippers off and just step in that room in your socked feet.
That's right. Thank you very much.
And the Eastern style toilets you often see maybe in a train station or public restroom, something like that is quite common. In the home, it would be a Western style toilet.
Yeah, and that was one of the very first mistakes I ever made in Japan. Was they had special slippers for the toilet room, and I walked right out of the toilet room with those on, and I probably walked onto the tatami mat, not knowing any better. So I made all those mistakes. So do think about what you're doing and try to, and if somebody stops you, and just apologize for whatever's going on.
That's right. That's a very good point, Sue and Wayne. So now I'm gonna go talk about the logistics and top tips. So logistics. So your American mobile phone may not work in Japan unless you check with your service provider for extending your data plans and for phone. You also have the possibility to buy in Japan a SIM card just to change yours. It might be more expensive, but there are different options for your mobile phone. If you somebody's talking. Oh no, it's one of our guests, I think. The very popular instant messaging in Japan is not WhatsApp, but it's called Line. It's similar. It's just that they like it because there are different cute, kawaii images. So they really like the Line. So if you are going to communicate with Japanese, I highly recommend you to install it on your phone. It's free. You also can find some public telephones, which is quite rare these days, but you can find they are in gray or green, like on the picture on the left side, and you can call with just by putting coins. Or even with a card. I think there is also a possibility to buy a telephone card, but with the coins it works well. And there is also something I advise you, if you're lost in the street, there are koban, police station everywhere in every city and most of the stations. So you can ask any information when you're lost in the koban, the police station. Because there is there is no crime in Japan. It's very safe, so the policemen can get bored, and it's just a joke. But so they are always very happy to help you. And I think the next session is the top. I'm trying to go fast because I know we are already like 12. It's already 7 p.m. So thank you everyone for staying here. And yes, Sue is talking about Suica and Pasmo. I think can you change the slide, Wayne? Probably I had some information about that on the next slide about Suica and Passmo cards. So not a picture, but it's okay. So yes. So don't be afraid of using public transport. And actually, the way you use public transport is that you can buy a Suica or Passmo card. It's rechargeable, very easy to use. So you put, for example, 2,000 yen, or you put, and by the way, it's the conversion rate is around 100 yen. I think it's less than $1. I don't know exactly the conversion rate, but I think 100 yen is approximately $1, less than $1. So yeah, for example, you put 2,000 yen on your card on the machine, and it's really easy to use. You can use it almost on every train. And there is a very funny picture on the top left side, women only. So this is a women only carriage. So in the rush hours, there are some wagons where only women are allowed to go in. It's just because in the past because the trains are so crowded, there were some hentai, some perverts, I would say, Japanese perverts that would touch the Japanese lady. So they decided to just set this new rule. So and last month when I was in the women only carriage, it was funny because I saw a man by mistake who entered in this wagon, and a Japanese lady politely said to him, "You're in the wrong carriage." So it was funny to notice that people really respect that. Very important to respect that.
Junko, if I can interrupt just quickly, I thought it's funny on this sign as well. We talked about them being very punctual. It says, during the weekday from 6:57 in the morning, it's women only on that train. So it's not 7 a.m. It's 6:57 a.m. It's women only train.
Exactly. And also, as you can see on the next picture on the right hand, so you can see the yellow line is for the people, the blind persons who don't see, they can follow the yellow line, they can feel on their feet. But also what is interesting to see is the arrows. So like you can see the arrows, which means that people will get off the train from this way. And if you want to enter into the train, you have to line up on the right and left side on the blue side. And this one is this wagon is specific for handicapped person or pregnant women, by the way. Joshua. Oh no, maybe not this one. But some wagons are specific to the pregnant or handicapped person too. So be aware with what is written here. But it's in Japanese. Unfortunately, if you don't read Japanese here, you cannot know. But yeah. But please don't be afraid, because most of the time it's written now in both in Japanese and in Romaji, so it's in alphabet too, especially for the signs. But in the left corner, you can see that the train station is written only in Japanese. So it depends, but most of the time you have both in kanji or hiragana and also in alphabet. So it depends. On the right picture, you can see that the roads are very narrow compared to the United States. So be careful when you walk and when you drive, because sometimes also there is no enough space to walk if a car comes. So when a car drives, you need to stop and just stick to the wall sometimes. So just be aware of that. Okay, next slide. So top tips. So for those of you who are gonna come at the Japanese SIETAR USA, you will see that Japanese summers are very hot and humid. So please wear clothes that breathe. And what most of Japanese do is that they carry with them a handkerchief So it's a small towel, and so they can just wipe their sweats. And also, you can have a refillable water bottle with you, but it's not mandatory because you can find Jido Hanbaiki, which means automatic distributors everywhere, and you can find drinks everywhere in a distributor, automatic vendor machine, and the drinks are cold in the machine, so it's very useful. And you can also have a fan if you want. You will be walking a lot because between each train station, there is quite a lot of distance. It's a huge city, so please be aware of that. And one of the most important advice I would give you, and it's connected to what Sue and Wayne said earlier, but please speak English slowly when you speak to a Japanese person, and please also listen carefully. Do not interrupt. As Sue mentioned, the silence, there is a saying that silence is golden in Japan. So if there is a silence, please don't feel uncomfortable. I know that Americans tend to feel uncomfortable when there is a silence, but please respect the silence too, and speak slowly, because Japanese are more comfortable at writing and reading English. Their education is focused on reading and writing. So if the communication doesn't go smoothly, you can also try to write the word on a paper, and maybe people can understand better. And learn a few words and sentences in Japanese. I think just the class you gave you is very useful. You can try to remember some of them. Okay, and I think there are so many advice to give, but yes, I have to focus on some of them. And also try Japanese food. Please be curious. There is much more than sushi. As you can see on the picture, there are donburi, so it's the rice plate with meat on the top, with omelette. There is soba, udon. There's so many different noodles, meals. You have sushi, raw fish, but that's not the only meal. And yes, and what is convenient is that if you don't know what it is, there is always a picture of the meal or even plastic food on display. So it's very easy to know right away what you're gonna eat. So that's quite convenient. And one of the
sorry, Yuko, the plastic food's also helpful if you can't read the menu. So, I mean, when I was first there, I would take the waiter outside back to the plastic display and point to what I wanted to eat, to be able to order. So it's helpful in any way.
That's right. That's true. And also you can find food and drinks anywhere, anytime, because it's very convenient. Because you have kombini, so it's convenience stores. They call it kombini, and you can find food, drinks at any time. It's open 24 hours, most of them, and you can find drinks on the vendor machines. There is also one important information is that there is no tips, not like in the US, so no bargaining too. So when you pay your bill at restaurants, the price indicated on the bill is the price you pay. And if you give a tip, you can be sure that the waitress will follow you just to give you the money back. And one of the most important words in Japanese, I would say for you is to remember is sumimasen. And I was very surprised last month when I went back to Japan, because it's been several years I haven't been back to my country. This is one of my country, and the most used word is sumimasen. Sumimasen to say sorry, sumimasen to say thank you, sumimasen every time. So even when they give you when they give you something, they will say sumimasen, sorry, which means sorry. It's a very small gift. So one of the most important ones. Okay, next one.
If I can just say one thing just about the money, because bring a little bit of cash wherever you go, because most of the time they might take your card or a prepaid card, but every now and then there's a place where it's cash only. I always bring cash for, kind of daily needs. And that's just one tip about getting around in Japan.
Yeah, and also
yes, that's a very good point.
Your foreign bank card may not work everywhere as well.
True. Mm-hmm.
Even no tips for if you're in a hotel for the bellboy. No tips for anybody.
No tips.
And you can withdraw your money from your American Visa card usually just on a few machines. So I noticed that the 7-Eleven and the post office money cash machine, I don't know if we call it this, you can withdraw money, but not the other banks like Mitsubishi, etc. So, but you can find easily 7-Eleven money machines. It's just that they will withdraw some money. They take some commission, but you can use them.
And here's some other additional resources we wanted to list. So first of all, Sue's book. So she's got a great book. So if you want a copy of that, you need to contact her directly. And then Sue mentioned the Japan Guide. It's great for helping you plan to get around from A to B, just to plan your public transport and give you tips there. Lonely Planet Guide as well. Sue, I don't know about you want to explain about the favorite expats website?
I think that was Yuko. You put that in there, right?
Oh.
Yes, because I have a lot of French friends who are expats in Japan, and everybody uses this website, and I had to check it, and it's very, very convenient. You can find information about where to go, where to visit. The summer in August, you have a lot of matsuri in Japan also. Like matsuri means the
festival.
Exactly, festival in Tokyo. So you can find a lot of information on this website. Useful, it's in English. Yes.
Yes, and then really importantly, Yuko was just in Japan and she made some great videos on how to do things, and she's uploaded those to our YouTube channel. So please check those out. I'm sure that'll be helpful for you if you're going to Japan soon. All right.
Great.
So we're to the question.
Thank you all so much. This has been an incredible session, and I knew quite a bit about Japan personally previously, but learned a lot from all of you today. So, so thank you again. And what we'd like to do is just take the next 12 minutes or so for Q&A. So if you have some questions, please just type them into the chat box, and I will go ahead and ask them. In the meantime, we have a couple of questions from George Simons for all of you. Wanted to know if, I guess, first of all, how casual can people dress if they're attending the SIETAR Congress in Japan? So if you could respond to that question to start. I can take that. This is Sue. Is that okay if I sort of give you some guidelines on that? And if either of you have something additional to say, Japan does tend to be more formal. And on the other hand, I'm sure that the people in SIETAR Japan, our friends there, would be welcoming of any styles from any countries and so on. But I'll tell you just from my experience that, for example, women over a certain age typically don't wear shorts, and especially to a professional event. Even men don't. Short pants would be kind of considered a bit too casual. So if you have a light pair of long pants, that would be okay, because it is going to be hot. Shorts without sleeves even. I always bring some kind of a very kind of thin jacket or something to put over whatever, short sleeve thing I'm wearing, because it's just, again, give it a little bit of formality. They have wonderful loose woven clothing in Japan that make it a little bit easier to get around. Also, people are very worried in Japan about the sun and UV. So you won't see many Japanese, depending on their age, etc., walking around with, fully exposed to the sunshine, just because they're concerned about, aging skin. But I'd say, go to the side of a little bit of formality, but obviously, and you might see people in suits going to work in their summer suits, but still dark colors, etc. So don't be too surprised. I don't think you have to go quite that far, but to have something for the conference scenario that's a little bit more formal. Does that make sense, Yuko? What did you see when you were just there?
Yes, I totally agree with that, that people tend to wear light pants. They don't really show their legs. And
Right.
also, something I would add is that the AC is very strong inside. So yes, it's important to have a jacket, as you said, to have a jacket too for inside.
Yeah, and certainly for men, my experience, you know, men attire for the summer. I mean, me going to the office, I had to wear, we would wear short sleeve button down shirts with a tie, even in the summer. We weren't expected to wear a suit or long sleeve shirts, but we had to wear a tie and a short sleeve shirt. So I would say for the conference, you know, business casual, don't necessarily need a jacket, but I'd say, you know, a business shirt, maybe short sleeve would be fine. Definitely not shorts anywhere, men, unless you're going to the beach or something. Closed-toed shoes. You can't wear sandals. For men, women, I think it's more flexible there. But yeah, kind of business casual would be appropriate for that. And the AC is very cold, so even for men, you might take a thin jacket or something to cover up. You might get chilly.
Great, thank you. Another question from George Simons. Could you discuss the protocol for removing shoes in hotels and also in apartments?
I can take that. For an apartment, there'd always be like a formal genkan, like we saw in the photo, where you'd be expected to take off your shoes. And again, take off the indoor slippers even before you go to the tatami room. Depends on the type of hotel. So often a lot of hotels are Western style, so they'd have carpet throughout. They may not have a formalized genkan, but as Junko said, even in that instance, a Japanese person would typically take their shoes off just inside their room, and they would definitely have slippers for guests to use, and that would kind of be expected, although it's not as strict for a Western style hotel room. If you do go to a hotel where it's more Japanese style, then you're going to take your shoes off at the entrance to even the hotel, and they'll have slippers you go around the hotel in. And if there's tatami in your room, then again, it's really important to take the even indoor slippers off. It's quite fragile, so you wouldn't want to wear even slippers on the tatami mats.
Yeah, when in doubt, you can always ask you know, as a foreigner, I just want to learn the protocol. I want to learn the right way to be polite here. Tell me what I need to do. Have that pair of socks if you need them, and try to think in terms of, yes, you might be taking off your shoes, but not in every hotel situation. There's some hotels that are geared for, you know, international visitors, for example, and I noticed that it was okay to wear your shoes all the way up to your room even, and then the room was so small you didn't want to walk around in your shoes. So, you know, this kind of thing. Great, thank you so much. We also have a couple of questions, I guess, rolled into one from Suzanne Jaspar. Could you please elaborate on the big eyes and the light skin? When did this start in Japanese history and culture? It almost seems like there's a sense of not being good the way they are, but need to be different, like Caucasians or Europeans. And maybe also address any problems with racism in Japan towards other races, and particularly people of the African race. Oh my goodness, can we do a whole other webinar?
Oh yes, exactly.
Interesting question. Yuko, you want to try to take a stab at it? I mean, it's a really complicated question, but go ahead.
Yeah, I can just start, and then you can continue if you want. Yeah,
sure.
Just about big eyes and light skin. Yes, actually, there is like. When I was in Japan, so 15 years ago, there was already admiration for that. So you can see a lot of Japanese ladies dyeing their hair in blonde or, you know, light brown. It's just that they admire what is different, and I think it's quite. And they also try to have big eyes. Like there is even a lot of Japanese women who do surgery for their eyes to make them more big. Like, so it's just an admiration. And like there are also a lot of hafu. So personally, I am a hafu, which means I'm a half French and half Japanese. Like Sue's son, we are hafu. And
no, you are double.
Yeah, I know, double. Yeah, just say double.
You are double. Right. Never have.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now they say double. It's more positive, and there is also a lot of like for example, you will see a lot of TV stars who are half double because they are a bit more Western. So just an admiration. It's just they don't think they are not good waiter, but just they are interested in what is different. Yeah, I even saw last month a little boy. He was just maybe 4 years old, and he was blonde. And just because his parents dyed his hair in blonde, and I was very, very, very surprised. And yes, and everybody asked if I dyed her hair, because I have one of my daughters. She's blonde too. And so it was very interesting to see this question all the time. But yeah, and I let you continue too on that.
Yeah, thank you for that, because sometimes you're right. It's just a fashion. It's a trend. Will it stick? Is there underlying racism? I would say yes. If you are able to come to the SIETAR Japan Congress, the International Congress there, I know that a lot of these issues are coming up more and more. There's a lot of sort of long history because of the insider-outsider idea. If you are an outsider, you are kind of marginalized. And I wish that I had another few hours to go into the history of it and so on. But sort of in a nutshell, in a homogeneous society, it's hard for Japanese to say, oh, we're racist because we're all the same race. That's kind of how they're looking at it. It's like insider, outsider. Is that racism? It could be. And I have noticed, and my other colleagues in Japan have noticed, that there seems to be a kind of positive association or attribution given to people from European-looking people. There's an assumption that they might be U.S. American also, which is interesting, even if they're Canadian or from some other country. And there's a little bit less of that favorability for somebody who is darker skinned or from Africa, from Southeast Asia. On the other hand, there's a little more comfort with people who look a little bit more like Japanese. They're giving guest visas for guest workers for nursing, for example, to Malaysians and Filipinos and Indonesians. They wouldn't necessarily give them to somebody who didn't look quite as Asian. And I don't know if it's the look or it's the understanding that, or the sense that they might understand Japanese culture better. Maybe they speak the language better. There's so much that makes it a little bit more complex. You can say that it's racism or ethnocentricity. You can say that it's a part of the culture to be kind of focused on the insider to the outsider. I don't want to put it as one thing or the other, since Japan doesn't have a history of races per se. But you can ask a Korean Japanese and they'll tell you something differently, because even for many Korean Japanese who have been in Japan for 3, 4, 5, 6 generations, if they maintain their Korean name, they're still seen as a foreigner. They have to carry around an alien registration card. So, and there are people who were born in Japan and they're trying to get citizenship, and it's difficult. So it's a complex issue. But in a nutshell, it's you might see different levels of what feels like racism or prejudice. But in some cases, it's just that familiar and unfamiliar, insider, outsider. So that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, just to add on to that, certainly it's complex. Sometimes all foreigners lumped together. I know when I was hunting for an apartment, a lot of the estate agents were just saying, sorry, we don't serve foreigners. It's too difficult. So many landlords don't want to rent out to foreigners at all. So we can't help you. It didn't matter that I spoke Japanese and I lived there for years. It didn't matter. And then again, when I was working at the university there, I had a lot of, international students coming. Certainly there was kind of favoritism towards the white kids compared to maybe a Japanese American or Asian looking student. Their expectations of to speak the language was much higher. They didn't get as much notice, but innocently you can say, well, it's not as obvious. So if you're white, fair skinned and blonde hair, obviously you're going to stick out a lot more in Japan than someone who looks Asian. So it is complex.
Thank you all so much. Once again, this has been a really fascinating and very in-depth session. So hopefully everybody who participated was able to learn some new things about Japan, and certainly for those of you who will be attending the Congress, get some real practical tips that will help you. Just as a reminder, we have recorded this session, and this will be posted on the SIETAR USA website under the events tab. So please feel free to go to that. And also, we will be sending an version of the slides as well. So thank you again. A big arigato gozaimasu to all three of you, and look forward to providing you information in the near future on the next webinars that we will be offering as well.
Thank you so much. どうもありがとう。お疲れ様で
Thanks
し
for joining
た。
us. Hope it was
ありがとうご
helpful.
ざいました。お疲れ様。
Thank you so much.
バイ。
Okay. Bye-bye.
バイバイ。
Bye-bye, all these familiar names I'm going through here. Hi, Janine and Kendra and Peter and
Thanks,
yeah.
Sue.
Thank you. Is this
Yes,
Julia?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
All right, I am now going to end the webinar. Thank you to, this is Holly Emmert, President of SIETAR USA. Thank you to everyone, and we will be in touch with more news soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Holly, and
Bye.
Julia, for your capable facilitation. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.